I think most impressions get better when they go a bit helium voiced, a bit Mickey Mouse. Like Scottish is very much like that, but then you go like that, you seem more like, it's more interesting, it's got more to play with, you sound like a crack addict.
Welcome to M8-Bit.
Hello everyone and welcome to M8-Bit, the pop culture podcast that's 6-bits game show and a 2-bit pile of trash. My name's Sam Riley and I'm joined, as always, by the fabulous Fareed Athman.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen.
By the devilish David... Where's David Hall? Not here, not here. And he won't be invited back. No, he's just on holiday or doing work or something. He can't make it this week.
Bonnie, Scotland.
But we have Faz, we have me, and we have the charismatic Philip Cairns. Say hello, Phil.
Hello.
That wasn't charismatic enough.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
That was just louder.
Yeah, that's charisma. That's like pro wrestling charisma.
Oh, that's how it
Yeah,
works.
just be loud. Loud is good. Right, we're going to start off, as always, with Synonym Grahams. Yeah. So number one, we have this game that came out a few years ago. It's a sequel. It's Ascent of the Crypt Burglar. Ascent of the Crypt Burglar. The clue is, posher than a prawn sandwich, more angles than an MC Escher painting.
Something of the Tomb Raider.
Rise
of the Tomb Raider.
Oh, Faz.
I got it.
Well, you did get it, but you basically almost gave it to Phil.
I said the full name.
One of these days, Faz is going to work out the rules of the game, and he's not going to blurt out the answer for someone else. All right, number two, Canonized Column 2. The clue for that, if there were any more sand in this box, you'd have to build a golf course on it. Or Donald Trump would probably spend most of his time there.
How unhelpful those are.
Yeah, they're not really meant for you. They're more meant for me, just for my personal enjoyment.
What was the first thing again?
Canonized Column 2.
Canonized
column. I'm going to have to rush you.
I don't... canonized as in like...
I can't think of any games with the word pillar in them.
Dave would have got this.
No, so instead of having a lottery-style rollover to next week, I'm just going to tell you what it is. That is Saints Row 2. See. Yeah, you're all terrible people. Just like the people in Saints Row.
I would never have got that.
Synergy. Okay, number 3. Doodle Zero's Infinite.
Scribblenauts. Something...
I'll give you that. It's Scribblenauts Unlimited.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Yes, it was indeed Scribblenauts Unlimited, and the clue for that was cow teats for hair, but no profanities, please. Maxwell, the main character, or Maxwell, I can't remember his name, kind of looks like he has cow teats for hair. But, you're not allowed profanity, and I've tried everything. Tried everything to get, just enraged dildo or something like that, but you just can't do it. He won't allow you. Okay, number 4, Terminal Daydream 10.
Final Fantasy 10.
Oh, that was a draw.
Yeah,
I'm going to say it's a draw. Where are we up to now? Number 5, The Senior Parchments, Airspace Edge.
Elder Scrolls.
Airspace Edge. Come on, people. There aren't even that many of them.
Skyrim.
Skyrim, thank you.
I don't know why it took me so long to get that. There's only 3 of them.
Skyrim.
Skyrim.
Right,
Airspace Edge.
I was just
I would have got really confused for a second because I couldn't get Morrowind, wind and airspace out of my
Yeah,
head.
I can see that. The clue for that one would have been, this RPG tends to drag on a bit. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will be here most of the week.
I was trying to make a fuss red out.
It's not even pun up yet, and we've already started.
I know. I mean, half of this show is basically pun-based, but, we'll all burn in hell for it at some point, but we're enjoying it now. Number 6. This is quite a complicated one. Are you ready?
No.
Noah Boat Pig Meat Metropolis.
What?
Noah Boat Pig Meat Metropolis.
Know about
Pig Meat Metropolis.
I don't even know where it started.
Barely a day goes by when I'm not told about how good Noah Boat Pig Meat Metropolis is.
That could just be anything.
That's not the clue. The clue is, this is the second game in the recent Racket Guy franchise. That's also a synonym.
Racket Guy.
Racket Guy. So, Racket Guy.
Oh, right.
Wait, I got it
about
about
Batman.
Oh, yeah. Cheers,
Arkham
mate.
Asylum. I can't even remember what the clue was.
It's Arkham City. I'll give you that, though. So, Noah Boat, pig meat. Noah's boat is an ark. Pig meat, ham. Ark ham.
Oh, my God.
And then Metropolis, city. It couldn't have been more obvious.
It couldn't have. It was literally.
It was
staring me right in the
slapping
face.
you in the face.
Yeah.
No, that was really obtuse. But I don't know. Who actually won that?
I'm going to give it to Phil.
Yeah.
Because if we say we drew on the Final Fantasy thing, you definitely won.
Okay. Well done, Phil. Okay, we're going to move on now to Great Bit Hate Bit. We're going to talk about things that we thought were great this week and things that we also hate. Although hate's a strong word. Okay, so I think I'll start, shall I?
Yeah,
Yep.
go on.
For my Great Bit, I've been playing Saints Row 4 this week. Now, I found it Annoyingly, after I'd just bought it for about £3 on Xbox 360, I found it in sales for about the same price on the next generation, so actually optimized for Xbox One and PS4, which was annoying, and that could have been a 8-bit, but it runs really, really well. And what's amazing is like a lot of the emulated games that are running on the Xbox One for Xbox 360, I've not had a problem with any of them. I mean, it's amazing what they've been able to do with what is essentially an emulator. Because if you've ever played an emulator for your PC or a MacBook or something like that...
Something always crashes.
Yeah, but if you go back far enough, like I'm talking at this point, I think they've basically cracked 5th generation and prior to that, so PlayStation 1s, your N64s, Sega Saturn, things like that, they're very easy to do, and you can get them running almost perfectly, or even better than they originally were. You can save anywhere, load anywhere, it's great. As long as you have the original game, I should point out. As long as you physically own the original game. But then I think they have more problems when it comes to PS2, GameCube, original Xbox, things like that. And then beyond that, it becomes very intensive on your CPU, and it's very difficult to do without a top-end computer, and it takes a lot of work on the part of people who are volunteering their time to make these things happen. You could say, oh, that's, they shouldn't be doing it in the first place, but there's an argument to be made that it's safeguarding these games against a future in which, you might not be able to find them anymore, you might not be able to play them. Yeah. So, to get back to Saints Row, and my topic in general, the thing I love is the fact that they have somehow got this emulator working really, really well. And some of these games I suspect are playing better than they did on the original Xbox 360. But Saints Row 4 is amazing. It's probably the best superhero game I've ever played.
Is that not the one where you get to be a toilet for like a whole level?
Yeah, a little bit, but that's in 3 as well.
Oh, right, okay.
Now, when I say superhero, I'm discounting Batman, even though I love Batman, because he's not quite a superhero in the same way. He doesn't have any powers.
He's just an OP normal guy.
Exactly. So if you're talking about actual superpowers, you can run down the streets faster than any car. It's a Flash game, in a way. Not a Flash game, but you know what I mean. A game about the Flash. Yeah. And then you can jump over tall buildings, like they say about Superman, but he never actually does. I don't think Superman jumps anywhere, does he? He just flies.
Well, apparently his flying is actually technically just him jumping, right?
Is it?
Yeah. Is it? Just jumping really fast.
Jumping then gliding.
I think that was how they tried to explain the science behind it. Anyway,
I see. Well, I'm not sure what the canon experts would say on that. So, basically those two things I'm loving is the fact that it runs so amazingly well. And having gone back to Saints Row 3, I mean, it's a much less intense game in terms of, in 4, you're jumping across the city in one bound, you're flying through the air, you're letting off 1,000 missiles at once, and also using like your flamethrowing powers and telekinesis. All this stuff's really crazy, and you very rarely see any slowdown. Whereas in 3, you maybe run into a gang area with like 10 bad guys trying to gun you down, and all of a sudden the frame rate hits the floor. So, I mean, they've optimized it really well. I would say to people, if you can find it cheaper on 360, then just get it on that and play it on the Xbox One, because it's so good. And as I say, discounting Batman and the Arkham series, I'd say it's probably the best superhero games ever. You can run like the Flash, you can jump like Superman and fly around, and yeah, you've got a few powers like the Pyro guy in X-Men. Can't remember his name. It's probably something like Pyro. Yeah. And I mean, they could have done more with it, but I think it's an example of a game where, because they had the foundation in place, they just added to it in so many creative ways. And a lot of people at the time slagged it off because they said they've just gone with the same city. They've not really done a lot. They've put a few filters on it to make it look digital, because it's now inside the virtual world of Steelport rather than the real world of Steelport. That's the city name. But for me, I've always been very invested in the idea of, if you could buy the complete engine of a game, like a Batman Arkham Asylum, and then make a Superman game, you will have what is already a 9 out of 10 game, and you can only add to it. I mean, maybe you'll do a few wrong things, but back in the day, I remember Age of Empires 2, in fact, they licensed their engine to LucasArts, who made Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds. Yeah. And that was a really fun game, because it had all of this all these great mechanics underneath it already, and then you just added this nice veneer. I mean, the danger is that you you never play another individual game ever again, because people just start cloning each other's, buying the licenses, and here's another Arkham clone,
Yeah.
But people already do that. People say that Sleeping Dogs has an Arkham clone in terms of its fighting system, which it does, but it adds to it, and it makes it, it does something different. I really enjoyed it, yeah. Really, so, I mean, I really loved Saints Row. I really loved how good the emulation was. And I just I've had a lot of fun with it, and I would recommend it to pretty much anyone. And you can find it cheap too.
Have you ever played the prototype games?
No,
I really, really love them. Like,
Really?
I think they're really underrated. Maybe not so much the first one, but the second one, that is one of my favourite superhero games ever, just because of the amount of freedom it gave you. And it was just, there's so many cool things you can do in it. Like, for example, you can be walking past a pedestrian and touch him, and it turns him into like a bio bomb. And then everything, like after a few seconds, it'll explode, and everything around him will like attach to him, like with strands. So like all the cars and the buildings and stuff, and you can do stuff like you can just run up buildings. It's got loads of little challenge mini games as well, where like they'll line up 6 soldiers in a row, and you have to like kill as many as you can with a certain attack. So there's loads of really cool and unusual things in that game. I think that's my favourite superhero game.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because the mini games are something that they must have spent a lot of time on in Saints Row 4, because they're okay in 3, but they're what you expect. Pick up the hooker and drive her over here while you're being shot at.
Yeah.
Go and destroy this gang base. In 4, they've got some really, really exciting, interesting, and novel challenges, like the Flash style running around, hitting checkpoints. You're not in a car anymore.
Yeah.
You're actually just running and stuff like that. There's like a Tron style mini game as well. It's very well done and very well fleshed out. Cool. So Phil, do you have any kind of thoughts on like the best superhero game, as we're talking about that kind of thing?
I don't know about what my best superhero game is. I'll tell you what the worst one I ever played was, though, which was
Superman 64.
Superman 64, yeah.
Actually, no, I've not played it. It probably would have been that. The worst one that I've played, though, has to be DC Universe Online.
Okay, why is that?
I remember being quite hyped for that when it came out, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there were some elements that were really good, but all it ended up being was a very, very terrible version of like Warcraft, like World of Warcraft. And it was clearly made for PlayStation, and I played it on PC. It was just a direct port, and the control systems was horrendous. I think those type of games, generally speaking, are better on PC than they are on consoles.
Well, you really need like a keyboard for mapping all of the controls if you really want to be a high level kind of player on an MMO. That's what I've found. Yeah,
exactly. It just became a bit too clunky. So I don't know about best superhero game, but that was definitely the worst.
Oh, fair enough.
Infamous as well is another series that I really love, for the amount of freedom that it gives you. So
unfortunately, cool. I think it was probably most people critics at least, considered the better of the two with Prototype, but they came out around the same time. So they were dueling. There are a few examples of games like that. You know how Armageddon went up against the other film that wasn't Armageddon. Deep Impact, that's it. So like you will get those times where you will get 2 very similar movies and sometimes 2 very similar games launching at the same time. And so you're probably right, Prototype doesn't get as much love as it deserves. But I played a bit of Infamous. It just didn't really grab me. I love sandbox games. I like superhero games. But for me, it just...
The original one, the first one.
The first one, yeah. Another great sort of quasi-superhero game, sandbox title, is Crackdown. Have you ever played that?
Yeah, I love that.
Crackdown was great.
The best thing about that for me was collecting all of the agility orbs and just jumping, like trying to jump as high as you possibly could.
Now, that was fun, but I think they made the mistake of making it very difficult to track which orbs you had and which you didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think there was an unlockable like there are in most games, where you go to the trouble of finding a map or something, and then you will know exactly where all of them are, and that's just a case of rounding them up.
Yeah.
You just had to go online, and of course with the ones online, you couldn't track which ones you already had. So I had a friend who did it and got all of them, and he just spent ages doing it, and that was unnecessary padding for what is a very fun game. But if you loved Crackdown, I would say Saints Row 4 is right up your alley. It has all of that and more. Like, I don't think in Crackdown, maybe you can in the sequel, you can't just run vertically up buildings once you've leveled up and stuff like that. You can't jump anywhere near as high. You can't like speed through the streets and stuff like that in the same way. But Crackdown was a great game, and Saints Row 4...
Number 2 wasn't there?
Well, I've not played it, but I'll take your word for it, because the critics kind of lambasted that one not being so great. We're going to move on to Phil's great bit now. What is your great bit of the week?
My great bit is a game that I've been playing recently called Stories Untold.
Tell me more.
It's a text-based adventure horror style game.
Right.
God, they're 10 a penny then. Can't move for those.
It's really good though. So it's developed by a UK gaming company called No Code, which I have absolutely zero knowledge about. I think they're pretty new. Okay. But the publisher is Devolver, the same guys that did
Hotline Miami.
Hotline Miami, yeah, which is one of my favorite games. Like I love Hotline Miami. But Stories Untold, so it's kind of like Stranger Things the Netflix show, which is it's set in the 80s. It's kind of like it's 4 chapters basically. The first one's The House Abandoned, and it's like your classic 80s text-based horror game. That's the vibe that they've gone for.
It reminds me of primary school days.
Oh yeah.
What could be more horrifying than using a BBC microcomputer or an Acorn computer? The horror. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
So that's the aesthetic they've gone for. But it's really, do you know what it actually kind of reminds me of? Have you ever seen any of those like hyper-realistic oil-based paintings that at first look really realistic, and then when you start looking a bit closer at them, you can go, oh, I can tell it's a painting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, actually. That's the sort of, I don't know if that's the vibe that they've gone for, but from sort of a distance or a quick glance, a lot of what you see in does look really realistic and is really like aesthetically pleasing. But then it's all sort of 80s based hardware and stuff. So the first one, The House Abandoned, it's kind of like your classic creepy old house in the middle of nowhere in the woods. It's dark, and effectively you just what ends up happening is you move through the chapters which don't really have anything to do with each other in a way. I kind of felt like at the end of each chapter didn't really tie it off very nicely. It actually kind of left it a bit open, but then the further I've got through it, I realised that it ties it up at the end. It kind of starts to give you clues and it leaves it just a little enough open that the ending, the last chapter, makes a lot more sense.
It's kind of a brave thing to do, though, isn't it? Because I bet some people drop off if they're not really...
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. Because at one point I started, I think it was after the second chapter. Because the second chapter, it's like some weird lab that you're in, and you're getting like a voice through an intercom, and it's asking you to like complete experiments. And I was just like, this doesn't really make any sense in relation to the first chapter. And then the third one, you're in like an Arctic ice station, and I was like, I really have kind of no idea what's going on. And by the third one, I was a bit like, this feels disjointed, and I'm not really sure I'm enjoying it that much. But it's quite a short game. I completed it in like 2 days, and I actually probably spent about 6 hours on it. Probably not even that, actually. So I was a bit worried about it just not really having a lot of cohesion.
But the payoff was worth it.
Yeah, the payoff was worth it, massively worth it. And the thing is that because it's so short, you're so close to finishing it by the time that I was getting to the like, I don't really know if I want to stick with this. That you know, in a normal game, if you'd been playing for like 5 hours, you might go, I'm not really enjoying it, and quit it because there's another 50 hours to go until completion. Whereas this one, I knew that it was only going to be a short while longer. But honestly, the payoff is well worth it. It's really good. And
you would say it's definitely worth playing?
Definitely worth a play. I'd give it probably about 8.5 out of 10.
Oh, high praise indeed. And how many bananas out of grapefruit would you give it? Since we've gone completely nonsensical. Look how random we are.
Oh my god, hilarious.
14.
14. Okay, that's a sparkling 14 in a still world.
100%.
Yep. We're living in a postmodernist age of podcast now. What is podcast? What? Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about Faz's great bit. What was it?
My great bit? Well, last week it was Neo, if you remember. But this week, based on Neo, I decided to give the original Dark Souls a crack.
You've been threatening to do that for a while now, haven't you?
I have, and I literally I played it for about 3 hours and I just dropped Neo because Dark Souls is the best game ever, yo. But because I was used to it in some way from Neo and from having a quick go before, I think I've been able to get into it a lot quicker. And I've got quite a few friends who were so into Dark Souls that, if I'm ever stuck or, at a certain point where, maybe it would be good for me to go this way instead of that way, I've had people to help me along the way. So it's kept it interesting.
Don't go to the cemetery first.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I do.
Those skeletons. I did that about 4 times.
Yep. I ran all the way to the door you can't get through and then realised I had to run all the way back.
Maybe I shouldn't be going this way.
Yes.
Yeah, but I love it. It's so good. Like, the lore is so intricate. Everything's fair, even though the bosses are so difficult. Everything that happens to you is your fault. If you got hit, it's your fault. And if you play it and learn the movesets and the animations, you can go back in the know and sort it out. and, finally kill the boss.
A lot of it is like a kind of muscle memory I find with bosses. You struggle and struggle and struggle. You finally get it, and then you could beat him again 3 times in a row if you wanted to. It's crazy how the human brain works, but that was my experience. How does it differ from Neo? Because that's your base, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's Dark Souls is definitely a lot slower and a lot more based on patience. So probably within the first few hours of me playing, I died so much more than I have done since, just because I was just rushing into every encounter like, well, come on, let's have you. And then realising that that's probably not the best way to go.
Yeah, but, the football hooligan way of doing things doesn't really yield results in real life or in Dark Souls.
Yeah, it doesn't really work. But it's been such an amazing experience, and I love it so much. Like, everything's amazing, from like the story to the whole atmosphere to the music. Everything is so cool.
And of course the layout of the levels.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing. Like, the fact that how well designed the map is, and how you can be somewhere that you think is a million miles away from the start of the game and open a door and like, holy shit, you're back at the start of the game. Like, no way. Yeah,
but of course you're always worrying about what's through the next door.
Yeah,
and you get that relief. I mean, people talk about the relief of getting to a bonfire, but there's also that relief of like, oh, I know this place.
Yeah,
and you learn a little bit about the way the mind works. It's like, just because you're in a place that you've cleared out before, the thing about Dark Souls, of course, is that the enemies respawn.
Yeah.
But because you're familiar with that place, you've grinded so much in that area, you feel much safer when you get back to a known area. But actually, you could just get killed again in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
It's wonderful level design.
Yeah, it's kind of like it leads you into a false sense of security, I suppose. It's so, for me, I know Dark Souls is old as hell, but for me, it's such a refreshing, completely different type of game from what I'm used to, and I think that's why I avoided Dark Souls for so long, was because watching people play it just looks so slow, and I was just like, this looks boring. I'd rather be shooting people in the face at 100 miles an hour. But then when you actually come to play it, it's so enjoyable. I had a brief foray into tabletop role-playing, and I think it's probably the closest I've got to that experience. I think it feels more real as well, because you're actually controlling the actions of the character rather than just saying, I walk through the door and I hit the man in the face. Like, I just love it.
I don't think there's any D&D club who are quite as mean-spirited as the makers of Dark Souls, though. Because the dungeon master would just be like, yeah, you're dead.
Yeah, every time.
I wake up in a strange room, you're dead. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to 8-Bit now. And as we always say, hate's too strong a word. It's just a mildly dislike bit, or as Faz suggested to me, irritate bit. So mine this week has been the leaking of the new Star Wars screens. But with the new Han Solo film, part of me says, oh, they don't need to do it. But they've got a great cast together. They've got great directors. I think it's Phil Lord, Chris Miller, the guys who did the Lego movie. But yeah, they always have a good eye for these kind of things. I'm sure they'll do a great job.
It's one of them. As long as it's done well, it's fine. Like, they don't need to do it, but if you do it well, that's okay with me.
Exactly. You never really need to do a sequel unless you leave a cliffhanger. So exactly. As long as you're going to do it well, I'm happy for there to be a million. But I've got nothing against the idea of keeping going with sequels and, having spin-offs galore. I've not been that impressed with Disney's take thus far. But the thing that kind of still rankles with me, and this is kind of a silly hate bit, I admit, is the idea that there is this guy, and let me find his name.
What's a rankle? Is it a wrinkly ankle?
It could be, but it isn't. Yeah, so the guy's name is Anthony Ingruber or Ibgruber, something like that. He, for a lot of people, is a young Harrison Ford. He was even in a film playing a young Harrison Ford. Mm-hmm. I think he started as an impressionist, but he's moved into acting. He does an absolutely amazing impression of Harrison Ford, one of the best I've seen. And then he looks the spitting image of him. Now, the guy who's actually playing Han Solo, who was picked for the role, I think Alden Ehrenreich, something like that.
I have no idea.
You spell it something like that. I hope I pronounced that right. He does look a lot like Harrison Ford, I'll admit. And, I'm sure he's got good acting chops. But it just, as I say, it rankles with me that you have been given this gift of this guy who could be Harrison Ford coming back in time to play his own character at a younger stage. And the studio just goes, no thanks, we'll just go with someone else. And the thing is, I get that this Alden Ehrenreich fellow is probably a bit better known. He's probably done a bit more acting. But everything I can see from this Anthony Gruber's back catalogue of acting, even though it's slimmer, is still good. He can still act. And it reminds me of the story of, I think it was Charlie Chaplin, attended a Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest and only placed third. You have the actual real deal there in a way. and you're not using it. So it annoys me a little bit just for him, because I think that maybe he's as someone who likes doing silly impressions, it kind of rankles a bit that he has probably been passed over. I don't even think he was in the final 8 or something like that who were under consideration, probably because he's not an actor's actor, or he's not well known, he's not done the stage, he's not gone through all of the stages that you have to.
From the other point of view, would you want someone trying to do an impersonation of Harrison Ford? Do you know what I mean? That puts a lot of pressure on the actor and the studio, that all of a sudden it just comes out as kind of a bad impression of Harrison Ford. If it's someone who's kind of looks a bit like him and maybe can do a similar voice, you get more of their take on the character.
I get that, and I would normally agree with you, but what blew me away is when I actually found out about this guy, as I say, Anthony Gruber. His impression was so spot on while also feeling kind of natural. Like, he doesn't force it. And if you didn't know that the film that he is in, where he plays a young Harrison Ford, you wouldn't think, this guy's a bit awkward. Why is he there? You just think he's a decent actor. And I don't think you really need amazing acting chops in Star Wars. I mean, they gave a role to, so many not great actors. And then the great actors they did have, they wasted, especially in the prequels. I mean, Ewan McGregor was made to say some god-awful stuff. So was Natalie Portman, and we both know they're great. And then on the other hand, you've got people like Hayden Christensen, who couldn't act his way out of a wet paper bag. And, he's made to look even worse. So kind of it's a bit silly. I shouldn't really be worked up at all about it. It's just, it almost seems fated that guy should have been a young Harrison Ford. Maybe he'll be young Indiana Jones or something. Maybe he's a horrible person. Yeah, I don't know. But I just feel like the fact that he didn't even get into consideration against all these other guys who were, let's face it, by Hollywood standards, unknown, a lot of them. I mean, there was the guy who was in Kingsman. He's well known, obviously. I think he was up for it. He didn't get it. So there were a few faces in there, but mainly Hollywood unknowns, and he wasn't even in the running as far as I can tell.
It's not completely similar, but when they adapted the Hitman games, they chose Timothy Elephant, who looks absolutely nothing
Timothy
like
Mumakill.
He didn't look anything like the character, apart from when they shaved his head, and he didn't sound anything like it. But if you see the guy that does the voice for Agent 47, he's bald, and he's pretty well built, and he's got the voice of Agent 47. Why not use this guy? Like, it didn't make any sense whatsoever. But
I hope at least they screen test them. If they don't do that, then that's kind of rude.
Yeah, they should at least give him... who knows what happened, but I'm kind of glad they didn't use him, because the film was crap, and they would have just tainted his name.
So we're going to move on now. We're going to talk about Phil's hate bit of the week.
Okay, so my hate bit, we're going back to Stories Untold. So,
well, controversial.
I know, right? So there was one thing that I really hated about this game. It bothered me so much that I almost stopped playing for a little while. And it's the controls for a certain bit. One of the things that annoyed me was that, in most games, if you're playing on the computer, you press escape and it brings up the menu, right? There was nothing in the menu to even view the controls, never mind change anything about them. You had to literally exit the game and then restart it, and it brought up a little box that you could then look at the controls in, which was not obvious to start with, which made the game a little bit more difficult.
Are you sure you didn't just bugger this up completely?
No, definitely not, because the bit that I'm talking about is... in the second and third chapters, there's a couple of bits of you sat at a table effectively. For most of the time, you sat at a table. And there's a few bits of equipment that have big dials on them. So, for instance, in the Arctic, there's a radio transmitter. So, you can change it to FM or AM or...
Radio 1.
Yeah, Radio 1, Radio 4.
Key 103.
Yeah.
Drive Time.
No, not that one. Don't know why.
Oh, fair enough.
So it's obviously, as you might expect from radio, it's got a big dial on it. And now my initial reaction would be, and I mean, controlling a dial with a mouse is not the best.
It's not ideal, yeah.
Straight off the off. Off the off.
Off the off, exactly.
Straight from the off, you kind of onto a loser. But what they decided to do was that you had to click the middle of the dial.
Right.
And then... after about a second or so, there's an arrow appears next to the dial, and it's just an up-down arrow. And to change, to turn the dial, you just have to move your mouse up or down, which is fine. I guess that's kind of sensible, except you have to move it so far up, like literally to the top of the screen, and then it doesn't even go that quick. It was asking me to at various points to go to like 8,000 medium wave or whatever it was, I can't remember, but it just takes so long to get there. I literally spent a good 10 minutes of game time in that one session just waiting for things to scroll by moving the mouse.
That sounds like the adventure game version of the bit in Snake Eater, Metal Gear Solid 3, where you climb the ladder that never ends.
Yeah.
Like the 2-minute ladder. It's like, we've commissioned this song, and we really need to get all of our money's worth out of the song. So yeah, your hate bit is basically just bad game design in an otherwise great game.
There was one redeeming feature, actually, only on the radio transmitter bit. They had like some plus and minus buttons at the top where you could just click the button and it would go up by like 100 or whatever, or 1 for some fine tuning, which is fine, I guess. But in the previous chapter, that option wasn't available. And it took me a while to work out, maybe it was just me being stupid, but it took me a while to work out how the dial system and the up-down bit worked.
Yeah.
I just thought like it was horrendously explained and horrendously done in the game.
Yeah.
It just took me out of the game for like 5 minutes. It took the tension away because I was going, I don't know how to work this dial.
I hate those moments and you have to like quickly like open Google and you're like, how do I work the dial?
But that's what I had to do. I had to watch a YouTube walkthrough at one point of the game and skip to the bit that I was at and go, oh right.
So Faz, what is your hate bit of this week?
My hate bit, remakes. I'm just getting really fed up of movie remakes. I watched Groundhog Day for the first time the other day.
Yeah.
Well, I watched it and then I was just like randomly IMDbing one of the characters and then noticed that there's a Groundhog Day remake due for release either this year or next.
God.
And I was just like,
why? It's a classic that belongs in its time, had the perfect start in Bill Murray. You're not going to capture that magic again.
It's just incessant. What is the point? Why can't we bring any new IPs out? I mean, like, I loved how in 21 Jump Street there was this internal joke that they were just rehashing an old IP, but it is true. Like, it's getting to a point where like every single release is just either a rehashing or just sort of like reinvention of an old IP. Like Baywatch has just come out as a movie, RoboCop a few years back, and that was absolutely terrible.
Battleship.
And how can you get Battleship? That was amazing. How can you take an amazing IP like Ghostbusters and treat it so badly?
Well, that got caught up in all the controversy, but I think a lot of the fans were simply saying that we're not offended by it being women, we're not offended by the stat, we're offended that it's being used in such a way where it's, we can just give you people in the Ghostbusters suit and not pay homage to the spirit of the originals, no pun intended, and do a good job of it. It was more like,
let's make some money.
We've done Conan, we've done Battleship, done Transformers, what next? Everyone loves Ghostbusters, let's just do that. Yeah. And, we'll make a lot of money and people will pay for the privilege of watching whatever it turns out as. And I completely agree with you, but I also know the reason why it happens is because movie companies know a safe bet when they see one.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't do that well, a lot of the time people will just go because they like the property. So if it's a choice between trying out a new IP and having people not bother to turn up versus going with something that has brand name recognition, they're always going to go with that. And it will take the complete collapse of Hollywood, or the near collapse, as people have been prophesizing for a long time, but it's never come true, for them to actually change their ways.
I mean, like, I guess with something like Ghostbusters, I don't know the figures behind it, but it's such a popular franchise that no matter what, no matter whether it was bad, people were going to see it. Like, they're probably going to make the money back in the first weekend, at which point everyone found out it was bad and people would probably drop off. But it's just so sad. Like, when you think about, like, all my favourite films are, like, from the 80s and 90s when people were still making original content. Like, there were so many things like RoboCop. The original RoboCop for me is one of my favourite films of all time. So is the original Ghostbusters. And it makes me so sad that in this day and age, we aren't making anything new anymore. And there's nothing that, like, say, if I were to have kids in the next 10 years, I feel like they wouldn't be able to grow up and be like, this film when I was a kid that came out was amazing. Whereas I've got all of these films that I love so much and they mean so much to me.
I mean, culturally speaking, it's not just the movies. It was kind of unheard of when I was a kid to re-record a song months after it had been released and just maybe put a rap on it on top of it, or a new verse, or have a new singer singing the same basic song. Nowadays, it's kind of normal.
Yeah, it's just a dumb thing, isn't it?
And it's definitely huge in Hollywood, that idea. But I think ultimately the real new quality content is on television now, and I think that kids today they're gonna be nostalgic in 30 years for like Game of Thrones, and everyone's gonna be like, wow, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and they're gonna be showing their kids that kind
exactly.
of
But their kids will be like, oh, Dad, I've already seen like the Game of Thrones remake, and it was well better, where it was set in the 80s
starring
and
robots and robots.
yeah, exactly.
Predator, like when Robert Rodriguez brought out Predators, I was really worried for that because I thought he was gonna be a rehash. That for me was like the perfect treatment of an old IP. It was such a great homage to the original. It brought it into the 21st century. Or whatever.
On another planet.
Yeah, but it was for me. It was so good, like the tone and the humor and everything. It just did it so well, and like it's such a shame that Ghostbusters couldn't do that. Like if you played the Ghostbusters game, did you ever play it on the PS3?
Got it the other day. I played a bit of it. Yeah,
the story
it's
of that
yeah.
and the way they treat.
It was written by the original.
Yeah,
some
exactly,
of the original cast,
and it's got all the original guys in it, and it's just so good. If they could have made a film in a similar vein, regardless of whether it was men or women playing the Ghostbusters, if it was that kind of treatment of it, it would have been so good. But it just wasn't. It just fell so flat, and it was horrendous, and it made me want to cry. And so is the remake of Groundhog Day also makes me want to cry.
Yeah, it's a sad time to be a big film fan, but you have to remember it's a great time to be a TV fan. So I mean, what do you do about that?
Remake things that were shit to begin with.
Yeah, make them better. Remake The Room.
What?
No, that you don't need to remake
that
The
was
Room.
perfect.
That is perfect as it is. So what was a shit film
that disappointed you?
could have been really good that definitely needs a remake?
Can I have the Star Wars prequels as one? I mean, I thought, because I was the right age, like a lot of people were the right age for the original Star Wars trilogy, I was the right age for episode 1, and I enjoyed it.
I did as well.
Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed it because I guess I was a kid and I didn't really know any better. I thought Jar Jar Binks was pretty good.
I thought he was fine. I've come to think of him as an annoyance and a hindrance, but he's not as bad as other people make him out to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2 especially. I think 2 was when George Lucas took on board what the fans had been saying, and I don't think he'd ever done that before. He'd always paved his own way, but he was so turned off by the reactions to episode 1 that I think he kind of tried to give them more of what they wanted: big battles, lots of Jedi on screen, whilst also still doing stuff that no one wanted, like the crappy love scenes and stuff like that. So he still made some mistakes. I'm not saying I'm exonerating the guy, but episode 1 for me was quite fun. But 2, if any of them were to be remade, I would actually like to see 2 remade, because 3 has its moments, but 2 has a lot of promise in terms of the lore they could have gone with, and instead they went with what they did go with. What about you, Faz?
I think I tend to block bad films out of my head. Like once I've seen them, I'm like, never watching that again. Let's get it out of the brain so something else can get in. So I can't really think of any on the top of it. I mean, there's loads of films that I wanted to be good, like going back to Hitman. I'm a massive fan of the Hitman franchise. I've even got a Hitman tattoo, but I wanted that to be good so badly, and it wasn't. So if we could go, they kind of did go back to it, didn't they? They made that other one called Agent 47.
Oh yeah.
I guess like one film that I would love to see treated differently maybe is The Purge. Like for me, that concept was amazing, and I think they did it well with number 2.
Yeah.
But if they could go back and make the first one again, perhaps a little better, because I mean, I guess like part of its charm was that it was a bit schlocky and it was a B movie in a lot of ways. A lot of the acting was bad. They clearly didn't have much budget. But if they could go back and do that again, I'd be interested to see what they could do with it.
All right, fantastic. Well, that's our great bit and hate bit sorted for this week. Now we're going to move on to imitate bit, the worst part of the show for Dave, who's not here this week.
Oh, yeah. He's probably breathing a sigh of relief.
He has probably pretended that he had to go to Glasgow, so he doesn't have to do another impression. Doesn't have to choke on another impression.
Could just imagine him having that conversation with his girlfriend. Oh, I really don't want to do an impression of Morgan Freeman again. No, just say you're going to Glasgow, Dave. Oh, yeah, good idea.
Right, so we're gonna read out Metacritic reviews, as we always do. And we're going to get Faz to go first. And what he's going to do, if you've not heard this part of the show before, is he's going to pick out a name at random, and that's going to be a celebrity or a game character, something like that. And then he has to read out the Metacritic review as the character, while Phil, at a certain point, will be calling out a funny situation that he then has to adopt. All right, so what have you got, Faz?
I've got... How are you, man? It's Davos Seaworth.
Davos Seaworth?
A.K.A. the Onion Knight. How are you, Stannis? Didn't kill your daughter, man.
It's not unlike. Take it away.
How are you? Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 feels like the equivalent of a straight-to-video movie, and one of the really bad ones that you don't
He's trying not to sneeze.
that you don't even... that you don't even have any washed up actors you've had sort of heard of. Instead, it's just a cheap... Fucking got something on my nose, I'm the man. Instead, it's just a cheaply made, unwanted to the franchise that should have never gone past... Pardon me, the first one. And yet, somehow, it's still the best series the series has ever been. I love how I just went into a deep-voiced man rather than a Geordie.
Deep-voiced man with constipation. Right,
There's constipation, it's legit.
We're going to move on to Phil now, if you want to pass over the Metacritic reviews. Okay. So obviously we're doing Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 user reviews. Phil.
I got The Joker.
The Joker.
And for clarity's sake, this is Heath Ledger's version
of The Joker. Fair enough.
Okay.
So Faz forgot to name who his user review. That was Metro Game Central. Phil, whose review will you be reading this time?
I'll be reading We Got This Covered.
Okay, cool.
Same game.
Take it away whenever you feel
the
like.
Italian pizza hand again?
No. We've had many complaints from the Italian community. No, we haven't. They don't even listen.
So, Sniper Ghost Warrior 3.
Sniper Ghost Warrior 3.
Oh, he's not doing a Dave, is he? Is he crumbling?
No, I'm not going to crumble. I'm just going to do a very, very bad impression.
Remember to do the...
Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 is a promising and somewhat ambitious concept that's played with some monstrous game-breaking technical
I don't think if you gave people 1,000 years, they would know what that was.
It's just right. Generic raspy voice.
Okay,
man.
The artist formerly known as the Joker, whatever the hell you're doing, is bobbing for apples. Go for it.
Inconsistent AI.
That was like the most stopped sounding fighting noise.
And some downright gorgeous design choices. Some of it can doubtless be patched, but as it stands,
it just reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where he's in the spaceship eating the crisps.
This is far from a finished product. And that's it. That is the review.
All right, we'll move on to me now. So,
would you like me to read it out, or do you want to
read it out? Read it out.
Okay, so you've got Alan Partridge.
Alan Partridge. Need help packing.
So I'll
go with Alan.
Fair enough.
Right, this is from Twinfinite. Is the reviewer gave it a 4 out of 10 or a 40 out of 100. If Phil, you want to pick a scenario that I'm going to have to merge into halfway through the Partridge impression. Right, and here we go. Granting players the freedom to decide how to take on missions and utilise the excellent sniping mechanic. However they like is an idea that Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 series
Alan is
required
going
to improve
through puberty and his voice is cracking.
on the underwhelming first 2 entries. However, since everything else, from the characters to the open world itself, lacks polish, depth, and quality, on top of the game being riddled with technical problems, Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 is far more dull and frustrating than it is ever enjoyable. There you are.
How are we going to do the voting on this? Because this is tricky, isn't it? The three of us.
Yeah. We could have a 3-way tie in this 3-way dance.
I'm going to vote for Mr. Samuel Riley.
Oh, Jurassic Park.
And it's not actually going to be that complicated because I'm also going to vote for Sam Riley. I mean, you're a good fan.
Fucking Davos, man?
Yeah, I don't even know about that.
I did a great canny impression, Pet.
I would okay, yeah.
My Geordie impression gets a lot better when I do it in high pitch. Like, how are you, man? I can't fucking believe it, man. I'm a fucking Geordie. I swear to God. I saw the police the other day, man, and he was knackered. I swear. Why does it get better when I do that? It doesn't make any sense.
I think most impressions get better when they go a bit helium voiced, a bit Mickey Mouse. Like Scottish is very much like that, but then you go like that, you seem more like, it's more interesting, it's got more to play with, you seem like a crack at it. Anyway, so that's my take,
Basically just trains
there you go.
Nutshell,
Right, so I'm going to move on to what we used to call Soapbox for the many weeks we've been doing this, and now we've changed it, as per Faz's clever pun, to Debate Bit.
Woohoo!
Because almost everything needs to
Do
rhyme.
I get a raise?
No. Right, so here we are. Debate Bit, and this week I'm going to chair Debate Bit. It was Faz last time, and we're going to talk about, we're all going to have a good chinwag about the possibility of taking a video game franchise and making it into a TV series. Now, we all know the pitfalls of taking it into Hollywood, and I think probably we'd all agree that the only good video game movie is the original Mortal Kombat.
What about the original Super Mario Brothers? The only Super Mario Brothers?
There's a reason it was the only one. And there's a reason that Bob Hoskins hated it till the day he died. I think he's dead. If he's not, sorry, Bob. But if you are dead, then you don't care anyway. So, jobs are good. So yeah, this has kind of been brought on by the fact that The Witcher. Now, The Witcher obviously was based on a book series.
Yeah.
So you could technically say this isn't a game being made into a Netflix series at all. But I would like to think that because the games have been so successful, that they have pushed Netflix to create something for when Game of Thrones is no longer around.
Yeah.
Of course, Game of Thrones is obviously doing spin-offs as well, but who's to say whether they'll gain any kind of traction? They could turn into the Joey to Friends, if you know what I mean, Now, one of the problems with the Witcher books is, of course, that the translations, from what I've read, aren't that great. There's a lot of nuance that's lost in the writings in the original Polish that you just haven't been replicated. I don't know if you can replicate them fully in any translation, but they certainly, from what I've read, it's even Polish and people who speak very good English have said that the English one is just missing so much of the spirit of the original books. So in a way, it might be cool to take them out of the books and bring it to the screen, because in the Witcher games, of course, you got a similar thing, and they did a very good job. The world felt very vibrant and alive and interesting, but also very gritty in a Game of Thrones way. So I think it could be a really great series if they do, it justice. In the same way that, HBO have poured a lot of money into Game of Thrones. They've got the right actors for the roles in most cases. They've largely been consistent. There's been a few silly things like Arya getting stabbed a million times and being fine like the next episode. Yeah. But for the most part, they've got a consistent universe down. It's done very well. Netflix have been hit and miss. They've done a great job with Daredevil for the most part. And then, within the very same series, The Defenders, you have Iron Fist, which hasn't been as well received. I think that they'll probably do a pretty good job in general. They probably won't pour as much money into it as Game of Thrones. And it may actually have greater name recognition because of the games than Game of Thrones did before it was announced as a TV series. So maybe they will, maybe they won't. But this whole soapbox, this whole debate bit is going to be about games that we think would make great TV series and whether it can work, because as we've seen with the films, a lot of studios just don't really care about games. They treat it as low art. They don't make an effort to get good directors, good actors a lot of the time, like Hitman you were talking about before. What I would say they should be doing is taking all of these studios like Blur Studio, who do all of these great CGI scenes for games like Halo 2 Anniversary or whatever they called it in the end. And the videos were great. Halo Wars 2, same studio did the same thing. And they should be giving those studios, the money and the time to create these great CGI movies based on games. Because you have the visual aesthetic down, you have the scope available to you in CGI as is in games, because of course it's very hard to make these things look good in real life. And then once you start throwing in a whole alien invasion, you just lose the scope completely. It feels very limited. There's always like a big concrete wall blocking most of the view and stuff like that, because they're trying to come up with ways to compartmentalize it so they don't have to show you the scope of these giant battles. So why not just say to hell with real life actors and things like that and just go full on with the CG? Mm-hmm. The problem with that, of course, is that maybe some of these places don't really know how to put together a good, coherent story. Like, they're just there to be the visual people. They take the story on from one of the script writers. And, of course, as we saw with things like Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, they kind of fucked it up. Yeah. And that ruined the chances of this going mainstream for the time being, I would say. I really think that that's something to pursue, though. I mean, I wrote an article years ago about how the Clone Wars series was kind of proof positive that you could take a science fiction series, for instance, give it the scope that it deserves, and tell adult stories sometimes, even in a format that people say, oh, cartoons, that's for kids. Whether they can also do a good job with live action, I don't know. What do you guys think? Which is the way to go with it?
Well, I was thinking about what I would like to see as a show, and I thought of Overwatch, because the lore's so awesome, and there's so much to go on. But then, obviously, Overwatch has got this very cartoony feel to it anyway, so I think it immediately lends itself to like an anime, and I think that would be great as a cartoon.
Well, of course, we've just seen that Castlevania has been adapted into a sort of anime series for Netflix, so that's another way you can go with it. Again, it's animated like I was talking about, but not quite the same way.
The only one that I thought would do really well was Dark Souls, because obviously it's quite similar to Game of Thrones, I suppose, in its setting and everything that's involved with it. I think you could probably get away with a Game of Thrones style TV show. based around Dark Souls.
But it is a very personal experience, and it's very desolate. I don't think
Definitely,
there's enough.
yeah, I don't think you'd be able to get that same...
It'd be like an art house film where there's very little dialogue,
Yeah.
you know, or an art house TV series.
Well, I
I
think you'd have to adapt it, wouldn't you, in such a way that it didn't have the same feel of the game, but you told the story of the lore rather than like trying to recreate the game and that atmosphere.
I can see where you're coming from. I think the lore is intended to be difficult to grasp, though,
Yeah.
in a way that if you actually had to codify it and put it down on paper and say this is that and this is he's the king of this place and blah blah blah, you lose a bit of the magic.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure Dark Souls will work.
Yeah, I get it. Well, again, it depends how you approach it, doesn't it? I think it could be all right. It just depends how you treat it.
Oh,
Yeah.
fair enough. What about you, Phil?
I'd like to see a lot more games done live action, like Game of Thrones was. But it really depends on what game you choose. Like, if you just choose a big title, you have a tendency to go, they've chosen it because everyone knows it. But I think you do really need to think about what type of game you want to make into a TV show. I'd really love to see something like Mass Effect. That'd be really awesome, especially Mass Effect 1. That was great because there was loads of lore in that you could find.
RPGs in general.
Yeah.
And adventure games, too. Games where story is king a lot of the time would make for great TV series. I think that's probably how they're envisaged as well.
But yeah, I think part of the problem is, though, you also need to find the right director and the right cast, right? I mean, that's nothing. I'm not saying anything new there. I think everyone knows that. We just need to see people given a bit more creative freedom and studios taking a bit more of a risk.
As well, it's taking the source material seriously and not just thinking that, oh, well, it's a game, it'll sell anyway.
You need to get the stories in games that are already great, and you need to try and adapt them without just kowtowing to the idea that, oh, they're gamers. Gamers like explosions. Explosions will do. I think, yes, you need to focus on things with strong stories. So The Witcher having a strong story, in part because of the books, I think that will do fine. Does anyone have any idea who they would like, or perhaps who would be the funniest casting choices, Geralt?
Julian Assange.
Yeah. He has to film the whole thing from inside, was it the Ecuadorian embassy?
Yeah.
Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen.
All right, so any more on that?
Last thing to note is if The Walking Dead wasn't already a TV series, I'd quite like to see The Last of Us made into one.
Oh, yeah.
That would be pretty good, actually.
I think the market's too saturated for Last of Us.
Zombie stuff, yeah.
But it would lend itself really well to a TV show.
All right, we're going to move on now from that to cinema stories.
Brought to you by Tommy Tucker Popcorn.
Not actually. All right, Faz, so what have you got for us then?
Okay, so all my stories, I'll be honest with you, pretty much just involve sex. But there was a time, a long time ago now, when I was working in the cinema back in my uni days, and I think it was Transformers 2 had just come out. It was a packed out screen, and I'm pretty certain it was like the release night, and we had absolutely no tickets left. And a guy comes out and he's like, "Yo, mate, can you give me a hand?" And I was like, "What's up?" And he was like, "There's a guy in the screen, and he's got an umbrella up." And this is like, you know, it's just you're like, what? Like, I had to like ask him to repeat himself. I've never experienced that ever. So I was like, right, okay, yeah, I'll come in and tell him to take to take it down. So I went into this packed out screen in a Transformers, and the screens there are different to how they are in like a lot of cinemas. So in normal cinemas, you have the ye old stairs, like, don't you? Like all of the seats are on a sort of stair formation.
Yeah.
But in this cinema in Preston, it was just a flat floor. So the person in front of you could see like directly everything that was happening. So as you can guess, the people who were behind him just had an umbrella in the face. So I went into the screen, walked down, the guy had an umbrella, and he was immediately, I could tell he was smoking a cigarette underneath the umbrella. And the reason why he had
I think
the
he was
umbrella
Cary
up,
Grant or something.
the reason why he had the umbrella up, I'm assuming, was to catch the smoke, because he didn't want the smoke to go up to the ceiling to hit the alarm. So
What, was he just going to stay there indefinitely?
yeah, I'm guessing so. Maybe he was like hotboxing himself, so he was like going to breathe it all in.
Is that how smoke works?
I have no
I
idea.
mean, eventually it will get out from underneath the
You
umbrella.
would think so, but maybe he was. I'm assuming, like, to be in this situation anyway, you would have to be under the influence of something. So maybe science works differently when you're off your face.
Under the influence of an umbrella, in this case.
So I walk over to this guy who's like got smoke billowing out from this underneath this umbrella, which is obviously like two massive alarm bells ringing, and I'm just about to tell him to just leave, And then I noticed that the lady sat next to him, I'm assuming is his partner, is also sucking his penis.
Wow.
So, like, the guy's, like, living the dream, like, he's smoking a cig with an umbrella up, with a woman smoking his penis in the middle of a packed-out cinema. And at that point, I was just like, I don't get paid enough to deal with this shit. So I walked out and got the manager to deal with it, and the manager, like... Obviously, I'm not going to name names, was a bit of a wet one. He didn't want to deal with it either. So rather than dealing with it, he just walked in, immediately walked back out and said, I can't see it. I can't smell any smoke. And that was the end of that.
Wow, what service.
Yeah, so as far as I know for the rest of the film, that guy had an umbrella up and was smoking a cig while getting a blowjob.
Wow. Right, so that was
Cinema Stories.
Yes, fantastic. And another scar in our collective memories. So, pun up now, and we're going to go this week, the theme of schools. So last week we had injuries and ailments, and the week before that...
a dislocated shoulder.
Exactly. And the week before that, porno names. So this week we're going with schools. And I'm going to start it off, ladies and gentlemen, with Time Splitters Future Prefect.
Oh!
So like that. And for our American and Canadian friends... because they don't have prefects, I don't think. Titanfall Monitor.
No.
You like
See,
that?
I really struggled with this one, but I think the main reason why I did was because I spent probably like 5 minutes on my lunch doing it. So, yeah, mine aren't that great, but Phil, you're next.
Okay, well, I'm not going to do what we did last week and go best first.
I see. Fair enough.
And badly. So, a similar one to yours, Sam. I've gone for Prefect Dark.
I
Oh,
thought
fuck,
that,
yeah, that's on my list.
Now, before we get past that, let's talk about what those games would be. Very briefly, as we did last time. So Prefect Dark would be Joanna Dark, I assume, the main character.
Yep.
Yeah.
Prefecting, just shooting people who try to go for their lunch early.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds about right.
Fantastic. Time Splitters Future Prefect, I would imagine, is just that kid that we've all seen in school who is a future politician, always like is sort of dressed up to the nines as far as you can be in a school uniform.
He wants to be a prefect.
Because he definitely wants to be a prefect. And he's a busybody, is what I'm saying. And Titanfall Monitor, I don't know, maybe someone
just
controlling.
a massive robot that
just
controls the whole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, so what have you got, Faz?
So mine are horrendous. Like, I'm going to save my best one till last, and 90% of the ones that I've come up with involve some explanation, which means they are definitely dog shit. But I came up with... See, this one involves explanation straight away. So there was the Zelda spin-off Hyrule Warriors.
Yes.
High School Warriors. Yeah.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah, you get it?
I get it.
Yeah, and that would just be rival high schools fighting against each other in a fantasy setting.
Or
Is
just the game Rival Schools for PS1, which was a fighting game. Going to go for my second one now. Bunsen Burnout Paradise.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, that would involve, instead of NOS, creating flames out the back of your car, you would just have a bunch of Bunsen burners tied to the exhaust.
Yeah.
Right, so Phil, what have you got?
It's kind of similar to the last one in the sense that it was a very similar game. I've just got Golden ICT. I think it would basically just be the same game because from what I remember from GoldenEye, and I really loved it, I spent the majority of the time just shooting the shit out of all the TV screens and computers in all the levels.
So, Faz, what have we got next?
Right, sorry, I was getting really excited then. I'm going to give you my worst one by far. Piecharted 3, Drake's Detention.
I like that. I think
That's your best one so far.
Piecharted 3, Drake's Detention.
Yeah, and it's just Nathan Drake in detention drawing pie charts for several hours. It's basically a mini game turned into a full game.
I imagine it's just that bit where you open the book and then you twist things around to try and find the clue. But it's just him like drawing a pie chart and then twisting it around, be like, what could this be?
And giving you random facts about pirates throughout.
Right, so for my next one, I've got Tony Hawk's Pro Tractor.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I like how you've gone into the pencil case.
I have. Yeah.
We'll stick with a similar theme though. So the next one.
Whoa! Tony Hawk's Pro Tractor.
Oh, sorry, I keep cutting you off, don't we?
Well,
What
here's the
is
thing.
it?
Here's the thing about it. It would be Tony Hawk's Pro Tractor. You see how that works?
Oh, it would be him on
Yeah,
a tractor.
No. It would just be his protractor that he brings to school to do
Right,
maths.
okay, yeah.
I thought I'd explain it for you.
Has he got his name on it in
right.
Tipex?
Yeah, exactly. You might use it, in fact, like one of those mini skateboards that came out in the 2000s.
Oh, Tech Deck.
Tech Deck, yeah. He like burned the ends with Bunsen burners to make it be able to pop. All right, Phil. What's your next one?
All right, so similar theme. I've just got Math Effect.
Math Effect.
Math Effect, I like that one. That was good.
For Americans only, of course.
Oh, well,
Because it would be Maths Effect.
Well,
That may even work better. Maths Effect.
Yeah, but they both work, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that neither of you had that one yet. I was sure that everyone would have had that one.
Yeah.
So what would Maths or Math Effect involve?
Oh, I don't know. Just
Could it be-
Tony Hawk's protractor just being thrown at aliens? I guess.
Possibly. Could the Reapers, could they be Ofsted? And you have to band together with everyone. You have to get the whole school together to try and somehow kill Ofsted. And for people who don't know Ofsted are, they're basically the people who come in and grade the school on how good it is. Faz, what have you got?
Oh, I've got some really bad ones. Like I'm trying to save my best one till last. I've gone for half term instead of half life.
I think we all thought of that, but then we all decided what a terrible idea it would be.
Or exam com instead of XCOM.
Wow.
I told you I was giving you my worst ones. I'm not hanging my head in shame over these two. I'm fully aware that they are terrible.
Okay, so my next one is Chrono Cross Country. Chrono Cross, yeah. Not as well known as your Final Fantasies, but still quite a well-known RPG series.
Uh-huh.
Phil, what you got?
So I've just got Skyrim.
Skyrim.
That's good. I like that.
For our American cousins and Canadian cousins, what is skiving?
Skyrim's just bunking off school.
And
Isn't
what
it?
is bunking off school?
That's an American term.
Is it?
I don't know.
Truant.
Playing truant is I think is the North American term. So yeah, I like that one. And I think it explains itself.
Yeah.
But
Skyrim.
where does the rim come in? Is it skiving off to play Skyrim? Is it skiving off a school on some sort of outer rim system in the Star Wars galaxy, perhaps?
I don't know. Yeah, it's just skiving off to play Skyrim.
All right, I'll do another one now then. Silent Grange Hill. Everyone's dead. Bow, 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 bow.
Like instead of the siren like that. It's just whenever Pyramid Head's coming.
Yeah, and James Sunderland's just late for school. And he can't fucking get there because he can't see where he's going.
Yeah.
And again, Grange Hill was a British TV series about a school, and it was shit. Right, so what have we got for your final one then, Phil?
My final one, trans sixth formers. And I was just going for it being sixth formers, and then I realised trans sixth formers takes on a completely whole new meaning.
I see.
Yeah. My last one is my favourite one, although it does involve a very similar pun to your favourite one that I've said today, and it's Red Dead Detention.
Ah, very
Excellent,
good.
yeah.
I'm surprised no one else came up with that. I like
Me
that.
too. I was relieved when no one else said it.
Considering you've been talking about how you thought yours were the worst, I think you've come up with two of the best there, actually.
Well done.
And on that, we'll end it. So thank you as always for Faz and for Phil. I've been Sam Riley. Say goodbye, lads.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.